Hey everyone, and welcome to today's session entitled Life Safety in a Pandemic. Our speaker today is everyone's favorite fireman. Welcome, Stan Spzytek.
Well, hi everybody. Stan Spzytek, CAHF's life safety consultant, here for a virtual session at our annual convention. Boy, I wish I could say that I'm thrilled to be on camera, but like most of us, nobody's thrilled, but this is just our reality. I wish I was in the room right now and I would see Katrina off to the right. There's Janet and Pam off to the left. Look in the back, there's Laura peeking her head in like she does at most of our real sessions. But our reality is, here we are. So life safety, we're gonna talk life safety today. Now I normally get 90 minutes with Jason and we talk a lot about life safety and OSHPD and maybe a little emergency preparedness. But today we've got to make a change, and I'm going to present my information in about 50 minutes, not in about 50 minutes. I've been given 50 minutes exactly to present a lot of critical issues to you. So one of the things that I'm going to do, I kind of imagined you there in the session in Palm Springs. I want you to imagine me here, because I'm going to go off camera in a second because I need to move around. I'm going to walk around my office and I'm going to be in a position where you don't need to see me pacing back and forth, but I'm hoping today to deliver you a typical Stan the Fireman, passionate life safety appeal so that you're doing what we need to do in our facilities, and that is focusing on life safety. Life safety and infection control measures. Boy, talk about the most overused word in the human language today. We've got to pivot. Today, I can't just talk to you about life safety from a pure compliance perspective, but I need to talk to you about some of the pivoting that you as providers and that the surveyors will be doing when it comes to your next life safety survey. You know, an underlying theme of today's presentation is that we at CAHF want to help you ensure survey success, but more importantly, we want to make sure that your facilities are compliant, not for compliance sake, but they're compliant in consideration of infection control measures, life safety, emergency preparedness, and all those things that you as a provider are required to do. So keep that in mind as an undertone to today's session. We're going to talk about the regs, we're going to talk about the CMS requirements and the K tags, but we're also going to factor in the way that you have to pivot and how CMS and their regulations have addressed that. We know that for the most part, we're going to be focused on the NFPA standards that are relevant to your facilities. We know that CMS and its contractors in California, CDPH, as well as LA County, are enforcing the life safety code. The specific addition, and I go through this every single time I do a session with my friends in California, is that I always need to remind you of what the applicable edition of the life safety code is. As many of you know and should know, it is not the latest and greatest edition of the code that's enforced. CMS and its contractors enforced the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code. That change went into effect in July of 2016. And consider this, I've been around now for 10 years. I've been engaged by CAHF to assist with emergency preparedness and life safety. And in those 10 years, we've only had 2 editions of the codes that have been changed. Previously, in 2010, when I first made my presentation, we were focused on the 2000 edition of the code. Today, it's the 2012 edition of the code. Enforcement started in November of 2016, and it's imperative for you to know that it is the 2012 edition. I consistently go on mock surveys in facilities just like yours, and the maintenance director is so excited to show me his or her library of NFPA manuals and regulations, and I have to disappoint them and remind them that they're using the wrong edition of the code. 2012 life safety, and here's the thing, and I make this recommendation every year in November in person. I'll do it again. If you're that administrator or executive director struggling to think about what you should get your facilities director or maintenance director this holiday season, get them the Life Safety Code Handbook. It's full of explanatory information. It includes illustrations and charts, examples and pictures, and everything that your facilities team needs to help ensure life safety compliance. Now, in addition to the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code, there is a whole myriad of other codes and standards and publications that are referenced by the Life Safety Code. Simply go to Chapter 2 of the Life Safety Code to find out what specific referenced code standards and publications are enforceable and applicable. Again, there's new editions of NFPA 13, the sprinkler standard. Maybe you're in a California city that has adopted other editions of NFPA codes and standards, or a different building code. You know, one of the things that we'll talk about is the frustration that you experience as providers with all this conflicting information. But to deal in fact, you need to go to Chapter 2, and Chapter 2 is a specific itemization of all the referenced codes and standards that apply within your CMS regulated facilities. So whether you're a skilled nursing facility with that type of license, or you're one of our ICF providers, there are specific chapters of the 2012 Life Safety Code that apply. Now, one of the things that I like to do, at least visually, when I set up this training, or when I do any training for that matter, let's say you invite me into your facility to provide some training, is I like to have a plan. And when I do a mock survey in my clients' facilities, I also need a plan or agenda. One of the things that I utilize is this checklist that you see illustrated on the screen. Now, I don't expect you to look closely and see all the items that are itemized on that checklist, but I want you to know that this is one of the resources that comes with my presentation today. One of the things that I pride myself on, and it's something that I hope that you find to be an advantage, is that I've inundated you with life safety resources. We've got checklists, we've got articles, we've got helpful information that are part of my program today. But the one main guiding document that I use is this Life Safety Code Documentation Checklist. If you are looking to get your facilities team survey ready, you need to make sure that all the items that are shown here on this document that you now have in your folder at your facility are checked. Everything from fire drills to generators to sprinklers to electrical outlet testing, all the things that I'm about to talk about are all highlighted on this checklist. And if you can successfully fill out this checklist and provide all the documentation required, you're going to find that you are going to be survey ready, and hopefully you're looking at a zero deficiency life safety survey. So let's just get right into it. What are some of the common things? You know, every year it varies from year to year, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, of what those top 10 survey deficiencies are. I'm approaching it a little differently. Like I said, I'm going to use that checklist as my guideline and kind of peel back the onion and go through each of these areas individually. So let's start out with the common tag. You know, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. Sometimes when I get that call from Jason Belden at CAHF or one of our other staff members and they ask me to assist the provider with some deficiencies, we're often seeing that fire drills continue to be a common deficiency. Now, here's something that you need to understand. I'll get that call from a provider in California or Arizona, and they'll say, especially in the middle of the COVID-19 emergency when it was first starting to roll out, they'd say, Stan the fireman, I can't meet my requirement for my April fire drill because my administrator has said, don't worry about the fire drill. Let's focus on infection control and we'll deal with the consequences later. Here's one thing that I need everyone in the room to hear loud and clear. There is no monthly requirement for a fire drill. Your requirement for fire drills are 1 per shift per quarter. The drills need to occur on unpredictable times, and dates. They need to be performed at unique times. The surveyor doesn't want to see that you're doing every fire drill at the top of the hour or at the bottom of the hour, because by his or her interpretation, that could be somewhat predictable. Make sure that your documentation is thorough, that you understand that you have no monthly fire drill requirement, that you are documenting that you've reviewed the pass and the race procedures. I'm not going to even go over that with you because you are skilled nursing facility and ICF providers, and you have to know what pass, pull, aim, squeeze, sweep, and race, rescue, alarm, contain, extinguish actually mean. You need to include a scenario. You need to make sure that everybody signs in and that you give an overview of the drill. If you don't provide this type of complete documentation, you're looking at a potential deficiency. But wait, there's a pivot. CMS has come out with the 1135 blanket waiver and has stated that because we are trying to safeguard our residents, our staff, and all stakeholders and constituents away from this infectious disease, we've got some language that you need to consider. In essence, and you can go ahead and read it, and one of the handouts that I did provide to you is a PDF copy of this PowerPoint presentation, which in itself is a great resource because everything is listed right here. Basically, CMS has stated that you can suspend your fire drills through this declared emergency, which now officially is running towards the end of the year. This declaration is in place until 12/31 of 2020. In lieu of doing fire drills, the 1135 waiver allows you to do some training and things that do not promote any type of congregate activity. So make sure that you've got a complete understanding of the 1135 waiver and the provisions it states in reference to fire drills. One of your handouts is the complete listing of the 1135 waiver, as well as a life safety summary that will give you this information. Now, in my experience, 85% of the providers that I work with and have an interaction with have continued to do fire drills during the emergency. But if you've taken a posture where you don't want to do the fire drills and instead you want to exercise the 1135 waiver, you can go ahead and do that. Other things that you need to consider and some common deficiencies that we often see, mostly due to poor documentation, is K711, your fire safety plan. It needs to be specific to your facility. It doesn't need to be a copy that you harvested from the internet. You need to have a plan for your facility. And if the surveyor deems that it is not specific enough to your facility, you're looking at old K711. Fire watch, again, down to documentation. You've got to have incorporated into your fire watch policy and procedure the specific changes that occurred when the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code went into effect. Previously, if your fire alarm system or your sprinkler system were out of service for 4 continuous hours or more in a 24-hour period, you were required to go on fire watch and enact your policy. Now, the reality is this. From the moment that one of those systems go down, you should automatically go into a fire watch protocol. But the policy and procedure clearly states when you've got to make notification to proper authorities, including the state and the local fire department. The change in the 2012 Life Safety Code stated that until your fire sprinkler system is down for 10 continuous hours or more, you got to have a specific and a dedicated person conducting the fire watch and maintaining a log. On the CAHF website, we've got resources for you that will help you develop that program if yours isn't up to speed. That change to 10 hours for sprinklers is really a benefit for our ICF small group home providers who in effect might have to bring on another employee if that sprinkler system was down. Now you've got a 10-hour window to navigate before you have to activate the policy. You've got to make sure that you've got a good smoking policy and procedure. even if the facility is a non-smoking facility. The expectation of the Life Safety Code is that you have a policy and procedure that addresses smoking. So have something put together. Here's one that gets a little dicey, and through the years since 2015, when this went into effect, I've spent a lot of effort on talking to you about the NFPA 99 risk assessment. The risk assessment is different from the hazard vulnerability assessment. The risk assessment is a life safety process required by NFPA 101, the Life Safety Code, 2012 edition, along with NFPA 99, which is the Healthcare Facilities Code. The Healthcare Facilities Code, the 2012 edition versus the previous edition, which was the 1999 edition, has changed in scope and concept significantly. The 2012 edition of the Healthcare Facilities Code, or NFPA 99, is a risk-based code. That means you've got to determine the risks within your facility in order to apply the code. Now, there's basically 4 categories where after you've assembled your risk assessment team, you've got to consider catastrophic failure of one of your life safety or mechanical systems in the facility and what the consequences of said failure without human intervention would equate to. If a failure of a system, let's say the electrical system in a skilled nursing facility in a specific area that's being remodeled, if failure of that system could cause serious injury or death, you're looking at a category 1. Failure of a system that causes minor injury would be a category 2. Category 3 is discomfort, and category 4 means no consequences or impact at all. I know you're confused on this, and I could probably spend an hour or 2 talking more about this, but there's great news. As a CAHF member, I've worked with CAHF and Jason and Jocelyn, his predecessor, and we developed some resources that are available to you on the CAHF website that include a policy and procedure, that include a tool like the one that you see illustrated on the screen that will guide you through the risk assessment process. Anytime that you do any renovation, new construction, any change of use, or any type of remodeling in your facility, before the architects and the engineers come in and apply these sections of NFPA 99, you as a facility have to determine the risk so they know what categories of the code to apply. Clear as mud? I get it. You know, one of the great assets that you have as a CAHF member is that you've got access to me. If this is something that you need to talk about, my information is going to be illustrated at the end of the program, and you'll be able to contact me like many of you do on a regular basis to provide you the clarification and the support that you are looking for. That's the benefit of being a CAHF member, or one of the many benefits. Fire door assembly inspection. This is one that is a new requirement. It went into effect in 2015, and it basically says this: any of the labeled fire doors that you have in your facility, whether they are required or not, if they are present, you are required to do a comprehensive FDAI on an annual basis. Now, most of us think, what's a fire door? What's a door in general? We all use one hundreds of times a day. But if you look at this checklist, or you look at the things that I've itemized on the board, and you look at the checklist that I provided, you're going to see that there's more than 50 different things that you need to review on a fire door and its entire assembly that includes the frame, the hardware, the hinges, and so forth. Now, here's the thing. You're able to perform this internally. Many providers will engage an outside service to do this, and of course, that's a budget item. But CMS has come out and said that the presence or the personnel that are in a skilled nursing facility's maintenance department, as long as they've had some training or experience, they are capable of conducting this service. Now, here's that checklist. Essentially, if you're doing it internally, and I'd say about 75% of you are doing it on your own, you follow the checklist. If there's any items on the checklist that need to be checked, that would mean that in effect, that door was not compliant and you would have to initiate some types of repairs. But I know I sound like I'm a commercial for CAHF here, and I guess in a way I should be, but wait, there's more. CAHF has provided you with the tool that I created on conducting a fire door assembly inspection. So we've got a sample policy and procedure, we've got a spreadsheet, we've got a copy of NFPA 80 available, the applicable edition that will help you conduct this type of annual inspection. So again, any issues, any problems, any questions? The most common question that comes up is, well, listen, I've got a door that's in my facility that's a rated fire door, but it's not required. So do I have to do the process? The answer again is yes. You have to do the process on all labeled fire doors annually within your facility. So frequency. Frequency is a question that comes up often. Sometimes surveyors don't like to see you outside the scope of the frequency of inspection, testing, and maintenance that's required in your facility. NFPA codes and standards have very few prescriptive requirements in the codes and standards that actually tell you what weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually mean. I took out a section of NFPA 72, section 3.2.106, that actually does give you an idea of what the frequency is. Monthly and weekly, obviously those are no-brainers, but we get into a little bit more of a gray area when we get into the quarterly, semi-annual, and annual requirements. In general, my advice to you is this: stay as close to the target dates as you can get. If a quarterly is due January 1st, the next quarterly should be done April 1st. If you're a Joint Commission accredited facility, sometimes those surveyors will give you a window of 10 days. As you can see on the screen, NFPA has come up with some other interpretive windows to complete those things, but my advice to you is get them done as close to frequency as required. Those fire extinguishers in your facility, they need to be checked on a monthly basis. You've got to do a documented monthly visual inspection of all those extinguishers. Now, your vendor, who comes out annually to test them and every 5 years to hydrostatically test them, have given you an inspection tag that's attached to the device itself. You're not required to use the inspection tag, but you are required to have some type of documentation that shows that you're doing a monthly visual inspection. You got to make sure that you work with your vendors, that you understand that your fire extinguishers are probably one of the most critical, if not the most critical firefighting piece of equipment that you have in your facility next to the sprinkler system. Make sure your staff knows how to use them. Make sure that they're inspected according to the schedule. Your kitchen cooking equipment. This is a dynamic part of your facility, and in my opinion, 26 years as a firefighter, retiring as a deputy fire chief and a fire marshal back in Chicago, this is the most hazardous part of your facility's operations, especially if you've got a deep fat fryer. You've got a dynamic environment, and you know what? Kitchen fires and commercial kitchen fires in restaurants, statistically, they happen quite a lot. You're under the gun, you're under the survey process, but make sure that you're complying with a clean kitchen, a compliant kitchen, not for compliance sake, but because it's the way that you're going to prevent fires. Make sure that your suppression system is being inspected professionally every 6 months. Make sure that that hood system is being cleaned professionally, at least annually, and more frequently dependent upon use. What does that mean? If you do have an active deep fat fryer or flat top, or you're producing a lot of vapors that are laden with flammable elements, those surfaces get greasy, and some facilities will do semi-annual or annual professional cleaning. Make sure you incorporate a process that is right for your facility. One of the things that is a big compliance issue, yet not often seen, and by most of us, unless we're involved with the construction process, we don't even know that they're there. But inside your facilities, from smoke compartment to smoke compartment, are fire dampers and smoke dampers. In the event of a fire or smoke condition, those dampers, just like a fire door or a shutter, close. Those need to be tested and inspected 1 year after installation, so your ears should be perking up if you're a new facility, and then after that, every 4 years. You typically need someone professional doing this type of inspection, and you've got to make sure that all elements are being exercised and that you've got appropriate documentation so that you don't get that infamous tag K521. Other things in your facility that you've got to maintain documentation for and practical inspection, testing, and maintenance are your elevators. You've got to make sure that that phase 1 and phase 2 service, where the fire department comes in and takes control of your elevators during phase 2, and in phase 1, when the alarm sounds, those elevators automatically recall. You've got to make sure that you are testing and maintaining those systems as operational in our multi-story facilities. In your exits, in your exit signs, you've got to make sure that you've got documentation, that you are visually inspecting them on a monthly basis, and then also on a monthly basis that you are, if there is a battery backup within your exit signs or your emergency lights, you are performing a 30-second battery test by depressing the battery test button every month, and then annually you are conducting a 90-minute annual battery test. You'll find out which batteries in your facility need to be changed when you do that annual test. When it comes to emergency power supply systems, we're talking about everything that's associated with K918, your emergency generator. There are a lot of prescriptive requirements when it comes to maintaining your generator. You need to do a weekly visual inspection. It must be documented. You've got to run that generator for 30 minutes every month, testing the load and ensuring that that generator switches over within 10 seconds or less. You've got to do an annual load bank test. The one big change from the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code and referenced standards is that you no longer have to do a 2-hour test. It has been reduced down to a 90-minute test. When I'm out in the field with providers like you, I find that the majority of you are continuing to do the 2-hour test, and you're paying for it. But if you're looking to reduce maybe a budgetary item and the scope of your tests, including fuel consumption, you can go ahead and make sure that your vendor is only doing what's required, and that is the 90-minute annual test. Now, if you're a facility where you've got people on life support, a level 1 EPPS system, you've also got to do every 3 years a 4-hour load bank test. I was just in a facility earlier this week, and I was reviewing documentation, and I also saw the invoice for the annual test, and I was amazed at what the cost was. I guess I shouldn't be, of how much fuel was consumed during the testing process. So make sure that you're testing in accordance with requirements, but if you need to sharpen the pencil, make sure that your tests are done to the minimal standard. Electrical receptacles. We want to make sure that if you have got standard electrical outlets in your facility, you are required to institute a process of annual inspection. You need to check the general appearance of all those outlets. You need to do a tension and polarity test of your electrical outlets. There's certain equipment, pieces of equipment that you need to have that your staff needs to be proficient in using, but you don't want to have a fire because you've got a cracked electrical outlet. You don't want to be dealing with a workers' comp claim because one of your employees was zapped reaching into a bathroom near an outlet that wasn't properly grounded. Make sure that you're inspecting and testing and maintaining these electrical receptacle outlets on an annual basis, that you've got proper documentation. But if you're a facility, like many do, that utilize hospital grade outlets within the facility, you're only required to do testing upon installation and after any replacement or servicing. So you can cut down on your ITM, your inspection, testing, and maintenance overall program if you have hospital grade outlets within your facility. This is an item, patient care related electrical equipment, that's under K921, that most of you, if not all of you, unless you've got your own biomedical engineering department within your facility or health system, you usually farm this out to a vendor. But all of your PCREE is required to be tested in accordance with your policy and procedure for physical integrity, resistance, leakage current, as well as touch current. You need to develop a policy and procedure that cites the frequency. Most of you as providers will go ahead and test this stuff annually, but the testing frequency is based on manufacturer guidelines. So if there are specific protocols or trigger points on when you actually have to test this equipment, make sure that your policy and procedure factors that in. There is no annual requirement, but many of you will test them annually just to cover all of your bases. Make sure that the people responsible, if you do it in-house, they're trained and they have frequent industry training with the specific products that they are maintaining. And again, that is the reason that most providers will engage a contractor to do that type of service. When it comes to your fire alarm system, a big change in the 2015 move to the 2012 edition of the Life Safety Code is the requirement for semi-annual fire alarm system inspection, testing, and maintenance. Previously, for those of you that have been around the block for a while, you know that it was just an annual requirement on your fire alarm system. You got to make sure that you've engaged your vendors to come out at least twice a year to perform everything that's required in accordance with K345 on a semi-annual basis as well as on an annual basis. There is some duplication on the things and the items that are inspected, tested, and maintained on a semi-annual and annual basis, but think about it. If there's one thing or one of a few handful of things that you want to make sure is always operational in your facility, it is your fire alarm system. One of the things that surveyors have lately been focused on is batteries. They want to make sure that you're changing your batteries on a regular basis in your fire alarm system, as well as your startup batteries in your emergency generator. They want to make sure that you are testing them according to requirements and that you are testing the charger and the discharge capacity of these batteries. It gets really technical, and that's where you need to engage your vendors to give you the clarity on your specific system. You're also required to do smoke detector sensitivity testing. Now, if you are a building that has an addressable fire alarm system, your system is in a continuous state of testing and calibrating and adjusting your individual smoke detectors. Every time you see one of those detectors kind of flash, the motherboard or the fire alarm control panel is sending a signal to ensure that that detector is in calibration. But if you've got an old zoned fire alarm system that doesn't use that type of technology, every 5 years after initial install and testing, you've got to make sure that you've got a provider coming in and doing a smoke detector sensitivity test on your smoke detectors. Now, if you're a provider with an addressable system and your ears just perked up because you're paying for smoke detector sensitivity testing, that's another bill that you can cut. If you've got an addressable system, you just need to have the capability of downloading the information that shows that your smoke detectors are within calibration. And when they go out of calibration, what happens? You get a trouble alarm signal or a supervisory signal on your panel, so you know that there's a problem. But it all boils down to the documentation. Let's shift to sprinkler systems. Probably that other most important element of system design that's in your building. It comes with a lot of inspection, testing and maintenance. You've got weekly requirements, you've got monthly requirements, and you've got quarterly requirements to make sure that your sprinkler system and all of its operational components are ready to operate in a moment's notice. When that fire happens in a resident room, and all of a sudden, if you've got a quick response head that activates at 135 degrees, or you've got a standard head that's designed to activate at 165 degrees, you need that system to work. So as I mentioned earlier, my slide presentation is pretty prescriptive. It's giving you all of the things that you need to know about these different requirements. Everything that you see on the screen was extrapolated from that yellow checklist that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So if you're taking notes or trying to keep up, you know that all you need to do is to refer to that resource information that I did provide to you. You've got to make sure that you're up with the annual, the semi-annual, all the requirements to make sure that that sprinkler system operates as designed. You know, I almost consider a 50-minute session like I'm doing with you folks today not as educational as it is motivational. I'm hoping that I am motivating you to put more focus on your life safety provisions in your building. Because one of the things that I've got to tell you, just getting back into facilities the last couple of weeks since the emergency started at around March 1st, I'm finding that your facilities are in not the best shape when it comes to life safety. Don't let these critical elements, whether it's a 5-year requirement, an annual requirement, a quarterly requirement, they cannot fall to the wayside. You've got to make sure that you've got all the documentation, that you're testing your fire pumps, that you're doing your annual flow tests, that you're doing everything to ensure life safety in your building, predicated by the operations of your fire alarm system, your fire sprinkler system, and the training that your staff has on how to respond when a fire occurs. But wait, everything that I just said regarding frequency and diligence and vigilance in making sure that your systems are maintained are kind of addressed with the 1135 waiver. And I'm going to summarize this really briefly because time is just moving on. The 1135 waiver gives you the facility, and here's the key word, gives you the facility the ability, here's the word, to adjust. You can adjust your schedules in a consideration of infection control measures. That means that if in the midst of this COVID emergency back in March or April, you missed one of your required inspections or you missed a test, you're allowed to show in your documentation that you needed to adjust the schedule to accommodate your infection control program. So there are some things that are not covered. You've got to continue to do your monthly fire extinguisher inspections. You've got to maintain your sprinkler fire pump. You got to maintain your elevators, but all of the other things that I talked about can be adjusted in accordance with the 1135 waiver. And if you've got questions about that, give me a call. ABHR, it's at the forefront of infection control. Alcohol-based hand rub solutions in the life safety code have got very prescriptive requirements when it comes to installation and use. Some of you have gotten this K-tag because your dispensers in a pre-COVID world were maybe too close together, or maybe you were storing too much solution in one of your smoke compartments. The 1135 waiver, and much to my chagrin, I am not thrilled about this particular provision, but the 1135 waiver throws out all of those prescriptive requirements. They no longer have to be spaced at a specific number of feet apart. They can be bigger in capacity than previously allowed. But one of the things that it does not address is storage. You are limited to 4 gallons of alcohol-based hand rub solution per smoke compartment. If you exceed those 5 gallons, that limit, the flammable liquid must be in a flammable liquids locker. You already know this, but if you're new, if this is your first life safety session that you've ever been to, if your head is spinning with all of the requirements that I've briefly touched upon so far, you have or you will soon figure out that life safety compliance in a regulated healthcare facility equates to a ton of paperwork. The mission, it remains the same. It's the same mission that I talked about 10 years ago when I made my first presentation in Palm Springs on behalf of CAHF. It's the same mission that I was dealing with 30 years ago when I was the fire marshal dealing with nursing homes on my watch in my jurisdiction back in Illinois. The mission, we want a safe and compliant environment of care. But there it is, kind of illustrated. Why is it so frustrating from this perspective to be a long-term care provider regulated by CMS? Because you've got a whole cadre of regulators that have got an opinion and interpret things a different way. You've got your first responders that come into the building and might say to you as the administrator, as they're walking out with the patient on an EMS run, hey, why isn't there an exit sign above this door? You've got your architects, your engineers, you've got the vendors that are trying to sell you things. You've got folks like me, consultants, that have got an opinion and an interpretation that don't always jive with ownership's and management's opinion and interpretation. And what does that lead to? That typically leads to a whole lot of frustration. So to start to wrap up my session today, let's do what I always like to do. Let's take a quick facilities tour. You know, I'm here virtually, and even when I'm in the classroom with you, we're not in your facility, but when I do a mock survey, I can point out all these things that I'm talking about. So in the interest of time, let's just look at your facility from a virtual, conceptual perspective. And I know, because some of these pictures many of you have seen before, you'll be able to relate to this. I mentioned that I'm finally back into some facilities. I'm taking the appropriate measures to do my mock surveys, but I am surprised, more than I thought I would be, about some of the deterioration that I'm seeing within facilities. And if you're being completely truthful, think about your facility and those hallways. You've heard me talk about before, the importance of the hallway. It is the most passive element of life safety built into any structure, whether it's your home, whether it's an office building or a care center. We need to make sure that we're keeping those hallways unobstructed, free and clear of obstructions. If a surveyor walks into your facility, and if you're expecting some grace, the reality is the information that Jason and I are getting is that there'll be no grace at all. There'll probably be more focus on potential deficiencies that exist in your facility. If you set up that screening station in your building, you've got to make sure that you've written into your fire plan a protocol to remove that screening station, which normally would not be there under normal circumstances. And if a surveyor came in and sees something like this, they're going to probably give you a deficiency. If you've had to compromise your exits, you've got to make sure that you have documented into your policies and procedures, as well as trained your team to know how to navigate and negotiate any changes that have occurred to means of egress in your facility. You've got to stay focused on doors. Why is this guy and every fire marshal that you've ever come across so focused on doors and gaps? A door, according to NFPA, is a protective, and that protective protects that opening, which is typically in a fire or smoke barrier, from having a fire penetrate through that fire or smoke barrier. You know that you can't prop them open. I see this in California facilities all the time. Beds are in conflict with the door swing, subsequently preventing that door from closing. If that door isn't closed, if the label is painted, if the door is not compliant, well, there's a great illustration of what a protective does and what the effects are of smoke and heat. A closed door will save lives. The National Fire Protection Association, in their 2020 Fire Prevention Week or Fire Prevention Month, which is which is October, is promoting close your door before you doze. So you could see the effects of fire and how a closed door will save lives. There it is, the hallway, the means of egress, the most important element of life safety. Keep it safe. Make sure that those penetrations in your building are sealed up, that those low voltage folks that come in and compromise your barriers, that they are properly sealed and fire caulked after they've been compromised. Make sure that your storage rooms are neat and orderly, that your hallways haven't become de facto storage rooms. Because if I was the local inspector or I was the CMS surveyor, any of the conditions that you're seeing on the screen would equate to a deficiency. You know, if you get that miraculous supply of ABHR, that flammable hand sanitizer, understand that you've got to store it safely. You've got to properly separate it from other combustibles and ignition sources in your building. Keep your electrical rooms clear. They should not be used for storage. Speaking of clearance, make sure you are not compromising your electrical panels, your sub panels, your electrical components within the building. Set up those no parking zones and make sure your staff is compliant in their storage practices. This one should make everybody shift a little uncomfortably in their seats, but I've seen it. I took that picture. These are the issues that we see out there when our mind is so focused on infection control, we lose sight of life safety and what's required with life safety code compliance. There are those prescriptive requirements for oxygen storage. Make sure you know them. Make sure that you implement and use them. Speaking of your sprinkler system, it can't be compromised in the ways that you're seeing with caps, with paint, with foreign material, including corrosion, with gunk that finds its way on your sprinkler head. Make sure that you're maintaining your sprinkler heads and your sprinkler system in a compliant condition. Everybody knows the magic number, 18 inches below. Make sure that the system is not compromised. Make sure that proper signage is in place. Make sure that those electrical outlets are tested annually, but if your staff sees damage or compromise of an outlet, make sure that a work order is developed, that we're not crimping cords, that we're doing everything in our facility safely so that we don't create unsafe conditions like you see here on the screen with extension cords, that we're only using UL approved, CMS compliant power strips within our facilities. And when it comes to the isolation measures and the things that you've integrated in your facility, understand that negative pressure is not required for COVID-19, but you might have instituted some of these types of measures in your facility. And I know Jason, if he's watching this right now, he's saying, yeah, no, OSHPD would never allow that. But the 1135 waiver does give you the ability to go ahead and utilize some temporary barriers. You've got to make sure that you do an alternate life safety measure assessment, that you train your staff on any of the modifications that you've done to your building. If the presence of a partition compromises access to a pull station, a fire extinguisher, or you need a new exit sign in place, make sure that you've done an interim life safety measure assessment and make sure that you take whatever actions are needed to navigate around this. Here's some more good news. One of the handouts that I gave you was this document that you see on the screen right here. So you've got a one-page document that will give you the ability to do an ALSM, or as Joint Commission calls it, an interim life safety measure. So here's where I'm going to make that passionate appeal. It's not compliance for compliance sake. We've seen in California facilities that are compliant with their emergency preparedness protocols. We've seen lives saved because of compliance. We want to make sure that you're compliant because it's the right thing to do, and compliance equates to safety. We want you to be ready for that local guy, that county inspector, the state surveyor, the person that's going to come into your facility and gauge your levels of life safety compliance. We want you to be ready for survey success, but more importantly, I think what we really want to do is empower you, motivate you, and just get you in a posture of life safety every minute of the day, so that in that unfortunate moment that you've almost got to think it's going to happen someday, when that fire occurs, when that alarm sounds, when that warning is given, you are prepared to respond appropriately. It's a programmatic approach. It's a systematic approach. And CAHF is always here. We've got your back. We're going to be here to provide the support that's needed. Here is my contact information. My company is Fire and Life Safety Incorporated, and I do work with many of you individually, but for the last 10 years, I've had the great privilege of being CAHF's life safety consultant. So with that, I visualize you all getting ready to leave, and I wish you the best of luck, and have a great conference, everybody.